and it's one of our most popular panels. And so we're really lucky to have so many great young professionals from San Antonio, from Central Texas, with us here today. And so I'm going to introduce our moderator, and she's going to take it from there. So Miss Mary Dixon is the Interim Dean of Libraries for UTSA, overseeing 4 libraries here on campus, downtown, and the main campus. She has her PhD in Communication Studies from the University of Texas at Austin, and she has her MA in Communications from Texas A&M. So thank you so much, Mary.
So I'm going to open up with a very, very short story. I worked at the Annette Strauss Institute back in the day when it was 5 graduate students in one tiny office with a professor who thought that politics was incredibly important and young people should not only be exposed to it, should be trained in it. In 2002, when I took a full-time job with that professor, who became a director of the Annette Strauss Institute, he ran out looking for funding for something called the New Politics Forum. We hit the road and encountered not just roadblocks, but absolutely astounded folks who could not imagine why on earth we would want to make more little politicians. And thought, oh dear. But Rod had faith, and we knew that this was an important endeavor, and indeed an honorable one when you train people to behave ethically and to focus on principle and on the importance of bipartisanship. And so we were able to connect with Hugh Agan at the Hatton W. Sumner's Foundation, a foundation that is very forward-thinking in the way it believes that representative democracy can only thrive if we train young people to be exceptionally ethical, smart, critically thinking politicians and political operatives. And they're the ones who have continued to fund this now, 14 years later. And so for me to have seen this in its beginning moments when we really weren't sure anyone would even come, we certainly thought we might not get funding. And to see 14 years later all of these wonderful people sitting in front of me and these distinguished people sitting beside me really almost brings tears to my eyes, because it meant that Rod was right and all of that work was worthwhile. And so I hope you will know that you are now part of a legacy of people who have gone on to do amazing things with their lives, and they started right here. So I thank you, as much as I thank these folks, for being here on your Saturday on this glorious March Texas Day in here learning about politics and learning from each other. So I wanted to start off with that. I could sit and read introductions for these folks, but I think it'd be a lot more interesting to let them start off by introducing themselves and just sharing just a brief sense of who they are and how they got to be at this table. So I will start it off with TJ.
All right, hello everyone. My name is TJ Mays, and thanks to the Annette Strauss Institute and the New Politics Forum for having us all here. I am the Chief of Staff for Councilman Ron Nirenberg. He represents the I-10 corridor in San Antonio. So if you think about Fiesta, Texas, La Cantera, the Rim, Medical Center, UTSA main campus, that's his district. I grew up in that district, went to Texas Tech for college, ended up majoring in political science, and went to law school and fell in love with politics and public service. And I've been doing that in the 5 years since I graduated from law school. And I'm really excited to be here with you and talk about ways that you can get involved or give any insight into how we can be useful to you in your career path. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Maya. I'm still an undergrad. I go to UT Austin, and I double major in government and political communications. And I am the current president of the Moody College of Communication Council. I also am a Hillary for 2016 volunteer. That's what I did my winter break. I went to New Hampshire. But I feel like I have a lot that I can relate with you guys as I'm still in my undergrad. I'm still figuring out what I'm doing. Post-May, I met Drew in the Archer program. I know a lot of you know about that great program where they send UT system students to to DC to find great internships. And so I'm excited to let you guys know about the different things I've learned across the way and maybe learn from some other people on my panel as I am still journeying to my professional career.
Hi everyone, my name is Antonia Okafor. I am the Southwest Regional Director for Students for Concealed Carry, And I kind of started my, I wouldn't say political career, but advocacy, activism career, becoming a precinct chair for the Republican Party in my local county, in Denton County. I'm from Dallas, so he said Central and South Texas, but I'm representing North Texas, I guess, over here. So I started that, and I went to school at the University of Texas at Dallas and got my BA in International Political Economy. And then I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in public policy at UT Dallas as well. So she talked about Hillary. I'm a Rand Paul supporter, and I'm still randing. So going with that, but yeah, more of the movement, the liberty movement that is kind of coming about from that within the Republican Party. So doing a lot of work in that as well.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hannah Beck, and I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders of Move San Antonio. There's another one sitting right over there, Chris Stewart, who you guys might know. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and I moved to San Antonio just in time to start third grade. Have been in San Antonio since then, graduated from Douglas MacArthur High School, right around 410 on Broadway. Went to UTSA, studied political science, women's studies, and really learned a lot about activism while I was there. In 2012, I was the president of the Young Democrats. I started the National Organization for Women at UTSA shortly after that, and then Chris, myself, and our dear friend Eddie founded Move in May of 2013. So I graduated from UTSA in May of last year, so I very much empathize with students, though I am not one currently. And I've been executive director of Move for about 2 years, but as one of the founders have been working to civically engage young people for just about the past 3 or 4. So I'm really excited to be here with y'all.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then I want you guys to jump in, because this is really about you learning from this excellent panel. So my first question is, everybody has to start somewhere. Where do you feel like your start was, and how did you make the decision to jump in? And we'll start with you.
All right, so I started college as a broadcast journalism major. I thought I was going to be on ESPN talking about the Spurs. I swear to God, that's true. And it turns out that I had a face for radio, so I ended up majoring in political science. Because at that time, it was the 2004 the presidential election, and John Kerry and George W. Bush were running against each other. And you know how it is on campus during these things. Everyone's arguing in the dorms, staying up all night, talking about it. And once the election was over, everybody stopped talking about it, and I wanted to keep talking about it. Texas Tech has a program. I know Texas A&M has a similar program. I know Archer here at UT System has a similar program where they'll send you to Washington, board you up in a place to live there, and place you with an internship. So I started working for a guy named Chet Edwards, and Chet Edwards was a Democrat who represented Waco and College Station in 2007. George W. Bush was his constituent. It was the 17th most Republican congressional district out of 435, and it was represented by a Democrat. Nancy Pelosi had just become Speaker. Democrats had just taken over the House. So he was in a really opportune spot to make a big difference, given sort of his profile. And I remember when I was asking, how do you keep winning? You know, I was watching The West Wing. I'm sure a lot of y'all did. You know, I thought it was all about these great policy debates, and it said, they basically told me every single person in this office, their chief title is Constituent Services Director. So if somebody calls and it's not getting their Social Security check, that is your priority. Your priority is not to talk about minimum wage, Roe versus Wade, all the things that people really like talking about. And that really left an impact on me. I was in interns, and I remember once they let me make a call to a Central Texas volunteer fire department and let them know that their congressman had obtained funding for their fire department. And I remember this guy was almost in tears when I called him and told him that, because now they're able to buy trucks, they're able to protect their community better. And after that, I was hooked. You know, once you've had that conversation, going and billing hours in a law firm just didn't have the same appeal to me. So that was my start as an intern in an internship program like one of those available to many of you. So I guess the point of my answer is to really sell and plug those programs to you. If you have an opportunity to do something like that, it will change your life. And I know that some folks in this audience have done it, and I think that they would say the same thing.
I think what separates me from the previous panel, they all mentioned they came from civically engaged families. I did not. I was raised by a single mom, and sure, both my parents, like every American, have impassioned beliefs about politics, but maybe they're not informed or they don't actually vote. And so as a child of a single mom, growing up in San Antonio, I somehow gained this very idealistic view of the world and how things could be better if we just talked about it and we just worked really hard, we were really driven, and if someone said something sexist, you'd be like, hey man, don't do that. And so I just realized that what I could bring to the table was my voice, and my voice for public service. And so when I got to UT, the Archer program was just peak. And I knew I could go junior year, and I was a freshman. And so spring of my freshman semester, I just got an internship. And it was for a PAC for Texas Democrats getting into the Texas State House. And it didn't matter. I just needed an internship, and I was going to gain more experience until I can go to DC and ultimately intern in the White House Office of Communication, because when you have a dream that you want, you have to go for the stars. And you have to think, yeah, I'm just some Latina from San Antonio, but you can do more if you push yourself to get experience now. And if you say, okay, maybe that's really high up there, maybe being White House intern is like for fancy people, but you can do it if you start gaining experience now. If you take every opportunity and don't say, is this the opportunity I need to take right now? Is this gonna be the most beneficial to me? Or should I wait for this internship? Because that paralyzes you, and then you can't gain experience because you're so focused on what's gonna benefit you next that you're not actually learning. And so that's kind of how I got my start.
It's funny, we have a similar start as well. My father actually was, when I was about 7 years old, he went to prison. And so I was also raised by a single parent mother. And so I have this story that's similar to a lot of people on the other side. It's kind of funny, people hear my story and they're like, oh, well, you must be this staunch liberal. And you're like, because that's usually the story on the other side. But I like to come to the table and say that, no, actually, I was raised by a single parent and little means, and I became this staunch Republican conservative advocate. So, but that's my story of coming from a public service background as well. And I was in Girl Scouts, and that really instilled in me this love of public service. And I went all the way to my senior year for my Gold Award, which is the equivalent of the Eagle Award, if you don't know about that, for the Boy Scouts. And so I just really have this love for public service because my family was at one time this entity that had to get help from other people from the community in my area. So I really understand and empathize with people who don't have, like we did, or were able to because of other people who wanted to help. And so through that, going to school and everything, I really became passionate about not only going to school, but also helping and being an activist while I was in school. And so, particularly with my start coming to Students for Concealed Carry, I was starting this organization called Network of Enlightened Women, a chapter at UT Dallas, and through no fault of anyone in my group, we were stopped by the campus police because we were advocating for pro-Second Amendment gun rights policies because last year we had the legislative session that was dealing with guns on campus. And so through that whole time being there and being stopped by the administration to advocate for something that was so important to me, I really delved into gun rights advocacy and was subsequently became the Southwest Regional Director because of this passion that I had to show the conservative voice on campus, but to show also the conservative voice in Texas and the United States.
So I think I've had a lot of different starts, actually. 16-year-old Hannah, very different from 18-year-old Hannah, different from 20, 22. I'm 23 now. I'm sure in October, when my birthday is, I would say the same thing about 24-year-old Hannah. Ultimately, I think my interest in politics started when I joined debate in high school, which I actually did not do willingly. My sister, who's 2 years older than me, her debate partner was graduating. So her junior year, my freshman year, she was like, hey, I need a debate partner. It should be you. And I remember saying to her, like, Olivia, debate's for nerds. So no, I don't know why I thought I was cool when I wasn't, especially in high school. But she convinced me to join the debate team. So sophomore year, her senior year, we were partners. And I did the exact same thing sophomore year. I recruited one of my really good friends named Erwin, and I was like, you have to join and be my debate partner, junior and senior year. So Erwin and I can tell you through the 3 years I did debate, I only missed one tournament, ever. Every tournament that I was able to go to, I went to. Every tournament that I qualified for, I went to. So I think I've probably been to around 100 debate tournaments. And I think part of the reason I loved it so much was the discussion. Part of it was the competitive aspect. I really liked winning, which we did pretty frequently. And part of it was the community. Due to I wasn't raised in a single mother household, but my parents were divorced almost from the time we moved to Texas. And I was, I think, looking for a space where I could really grow and have a family. And that's what my debate coaches, debate team, et cetera, became for me. So there are some other influences, community-based experiences, relationship experiences, et cetera, that have influenced new starts for my political career. But I think that's the first one.
Okay, one more question for me, and then I'm opening it up to y'all. I would like to know if you could give everybody one piece of advice, but it has to be based on something that you've learned through the rough experience. What would it be? That one thing where, wow, I really wish I'd known this before I move forward. Anybody can jump in.
If you make a mistake, just own it immediately. Because the natural inclination is to shift blame, but it ends up making you look worse. And I learned that the hard way on 1 or 2 occasions before my 24th birthday. And I violated my own rule of making the same mistake twice. But after making it twice, both in law firm situations, not in political situations, that would be my big one.
Yeah. So I mentioned I went to New Hampshire for a month. That was the first time I had done something that I didn't have to do it. I wasn't getting paid. I didn't know anyone else. I paid for my flight, and I went and I lived there for a month. And every day, woke up at 9 a.m., stayed till 9 p.m., knocking on doors, making calls, recruiting. And so it was like a really big step. And I remember sitting on the plane when we landed in Manchester thinking, am I making a mistake? Because I could be making money. I could be selling clothes at Banana Republic and making money. But I did it. And I think, and it snowed and I'm not used to that. And it was very hard to walk 5 miles every day, door to door. But other fellows would complain. They're like, this is really hard work, or I'm really tired. And the whole time I was like, I flew out here. If you're gonna do something and it's gonna be hard, know that you're doing it for a reason. I believe in my candidate, and that's why I went. So if you are gonna do something that's gonna have an emotional toil on you, a physical toil on you, believe in it, because you're gonna you're gonna guess. So you're gonna be like, did I do the right thing? So make sure it's something you believe in, because it's gonna affect you. You're gonna knock on a door, and someone's gonna be like, I don't like this. I don't like politics, bye. And it's gonna feel bad, but if you are doing it for a reason you believe in, you can just brush it off your shoulder.
I'd say for me, my struggle has been owning my experience and owning, the things that I have done in my past. And that sounds automatically shady, I just said. Oh man, I shouldn't talk about that. No, when I mean that, I'm someone who's very passionate, and when I get into something, I'm in it, completely. And sometimes, some people will have this, I look at other people who have this career plan, and I did this because then it leads to this, and and leads to that. I'm like, well, I just really love talking about that, and I did it. And then you have to kind of look at this mosaic of different experiences, and then you figure out eventually, and I'm finally starting to get that, hopefully, of that common thread of how they work together and how I can make a career out of it, or, you know, God forbid, make money out of it. But I think I had to work through that, you know, as this millennial, and I think a lot of us are dealing with that right now is how do we put all these experiences, these internships that we have, these unpaid internships that we did in college or in graduate school, and how do we get that common thread so we can actually, you know, make a living in the future. And so I would say just keep going with it. I mean, in the end, I know it sounds so cliche, but sure, you can be making 6 figures or whatever, but if you don't love what you're doing, then what's the point? And if you're not making an impact in your world, I mean, we're here because we want to make an impact, and we love public service. So in the end, if we're not doing something that we're passionate about and we can't make an impact on other people's lives, then really seriously think about what you're doing and if the compensation is, you know, worthy of it.
So I've had a lot of experiences that have been giving me life lessons, and Chris, who's our board chair, which makes him my boss, will definitely attest to the fact that I've made a bunch of mistakes as an executive director at the age of 21. But I think the advice that I would give is to be authentic and to be confident in your authenticity. So like 2 examples come to mind. One is the first time I was meeting an elected official, like one-on-one. I was meeting Ron Nirenberg, and I remember texting Chris or talking to Chris and saying like, oh my God, what do I wear to this thing? I want to talk about CPS energy rates. And Chris like responded and was like, Hannah, you're firstly really overthinking this because you're asking me. And secondly, like, you're a college student who wants to talk about CPS energy rates. Dress like you are a college student. Like you don't need to show up in a suit to have this conversation, especially with your city councilman who already knows you. And so that was really helpful sort of for the way I contextualize the work that I do, how I present myself, where I show up, the mood that I'm in, the way I'm communicating. And the second experience for that is like, to be confident while you're being authentic, and sort of owning the space that you're in, right? So like we've already had 2 people speak about like life challenges that they've had here, right? One of the many starts that I had in politics was moving away from the Democratic Party, which I did after I was raped my freshman year of college. And for like probably 2 years, I didn't really talk to people about that. I certainly wouldn't do it in this sort of a setting. But it was a realization for me that if I show up as my authentic self, right, which is a survivor of sexual assault, then those of you who are in the audience who have experienced that will see yourself represented on this panel, right? And that's important because when I went through that, I didn't see a single person that I could look to in my career field who had my life experience. So I would really urge you to be authentic and to do it with confidence, as long as you're in a space, of course, where that's safe for you to do. Yeah, and I think those are 2 of the lessons I've learned, certainly.
Okay, well, I can ask questions all day, but I'm guessing there's probably some here in the audience. So what have we got? We've got one over here. Is that Jonathan? I'm looking at a name tag? Okay. My eyes still work.
I know, man. I can't even.
So this question is kind of directed towards TJ, and it's with regards to the last panel that was up here as well. What would you say the significance of law school has been for you in your career?
It's funny because usually when I talk about law school, I talk about my student loan payments, which are due tomorrow, I think. So I'll have to get on the bank with that. No, it teaches you how to think differently. It definitely does, almost to a detriment in maybe interpersonal relationships or in political conversations. But if it's something that you're really interested in doing, I would encourage you to explore it, but just be very cognizant of the cost. That's pretty much what I'd tell you. It teaches you to think differently, but it's really expensive.
more like if there was one thing that you would change that you've been through so far to get to where you are, what would it be?
I think Hannah can start with that one.
I knew you were going to do that. I actually wouldn't change anything. And I think a lot of people say that because they believe that everything happens for a reason. I don't. I'm not like a particularly religious or spiritual person. I think sometimes things just happen, right? And that's like an easier concept for me to reconcile with and to live with. I also think that everything you do builds on other things in your life. And so if I were to change anything that I had done up until here, I wouldn't be here in my mind. So like mistakes that I've made, experiences that I've had that are negative, those shape me just as much as the positive ones. I think, I would have liked to be, I guess, more confident in who I am when I was younger. I think it took me a really long time to get comfortable with myself. But yeah, I mean, I really wouldn't change much of anything that I've done.
Anybody else have anything on that one? You should change now?
So I'll go on a personal note, less than a political note, but I should mention that one of the lessons I've learned as to be effective professionally, it's better to have your personal stuff kind of handled, right? So I spent a lot of years thinking what I needed out of life is what people told me I should need out of life, which is a house and a white picket fence and a 2-car garage and all these things. And I woke up at the age of 29 and had all those things, and I was miserable. And that was making me less effective at my job and making me a less effective political figure. I feel like I've made some giant steps forward in reassessing what matters to me. That all that being said, you're going to be most effective professionally if you're being true to yourself in your personal life. It's almost trite to say, to thine own self be true, right? We've all read our Shakespeare, but I think he had a point. So
I'd like to add on to that. I'm just honing on that again. Just really, when I'm the most successful I found in my career has been, or career, I feel like I'm only 26, I haven't really started, but, and so far what I've been in life, that the times that I'm most successful where, with regards if it's money or if it's, media attention or whatever, it's always when I'm being my authentic self. So like I said, I'm in the Republican Party and I'm very active, but I'm a different looking Republican, Black woman. I'm unique in the Republican Party right now. So I also have different ideas and different views. For example, I focus a lot on criminal justice reform because my father was put in prison for a drug crime. So that kind of puts me in more of the liberty camp. Some Republicans don't like that, but I'm going to talk about it, and I think it's a conservative issue and something that we have to talk about on the national stage. And so that's why it's important to hone in on your uniqueness, because in the end, the people who are successful in this world, Mark Zuckerbergs and whatever, they weren't doing the same thing everyone else was doing. They had something unique about them, and they shared it to the world, and the world took it, and that's what makes them successful. So just want to talk about that.
And I think the caveat to that is you learn what your unique self is by being around people who are very different from you. You can only really know how you feel about something until you're forced in a conversation with a friend, and you're like, well, I think this, and then they say, well, wouldn't you say this is true? And then you have to completely reconfigure what you believe in. And you can't know yourself until you've been put in a situation where you have to put your words to actions. Like you can say, I'm a really honest person, and then you get put in a situation where you see somebody like made fun of, or you see someone advocating something you don't believe in, and then you don't speak up. Or you're not willing to put yourself out there to people who could reject that. So you need to surround yourself with people who are going to challenge you and who are different from you. And that, I think, was something I do regret. I think, especially right now in the 2016 cycle, there's so much going on, and it's really challenging how I feel about America and what Americans feel. I think a lot of you are feeling this too, where who are we right now? And so I wish that I had interacted with people who are so extremely different than me that I could grasp what that is. So I could have a better understanding, and then I could move forward knowing what was best to do next. So I would say definitely surround yourself with people who are different from you and who can challenge you.
Can I piggyback on that real quick? My views on gender equality issues have been fundamentally changed by a lot of conversations with Hannah Beck about it. So I would double down on what you just said, because I know that I've experienced the most growth in the way I view the world when I'm talking to people who I disagree with, and a lot of times they'll flip me right around. So.
And you cannot be afraid of that.
Yeah.
You know, that's, I think, something I can tell you at 44 is what you believed at 16, 22, 25, 28 changes over time, and you have to not latch onto those ideas because you said them 5 years ago and you want to not contradict yourself. Jump in, be different, change yourself.
Rather be right than consistent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do Brandon, then Wes, and then we'll move on.
Great, awesome. Hey, thanks guys for being on this panel. So I think you guys are all pretty much millennials, if I'm not mistaken. And I think most of the people in the crowd on the younger side, I'm on the older side of that. I was wondering what you could say, what is one positive thing about our generation that is our biggest asset that'll help us politically? And what's one of the baggage things that we have that we just need to get over? I was wondering if you guys could elaborate. Anyone?
Told you they had better questions than I did.
I really don't know how to begin with what is our biggest asset. I mean, obviously it's the internet and social media, which is like trite. But the thing is just like, I worry about millennials because, and I am one, so I'm like, I'm different, but I'm not. So the thing about millennials, as we are, is that we somehow think we're smarter than other generations, but without having anything to back it up. And so because we have social media, and there are those who are very smart on social media, presenting great views, but then you have those who aren't willing to like dig into that and then immediately accept that and throw it down in everyone else's face, but there's nothing substantial behind it. And there's nothing informative, there's no critical thinking in social media. And we're so sucked into like, I just saw that, that's totally true, and I believe that now. But you have to be willing to analyze. And I think there's a loss of analytical thinking with the social media age and an immediate acceptance of things that we see all the time, because it's really easy to shut out everything you disagree with when it comes to social media. And I think that's something we are willing to overcome. So that's probably the positive of millennials, is we're willing to change our minds, but it's so overwhelmingly hard to get us to have the information that we need to change our minds. And it's really hard to vocalize that we changed our minds.
And on the positive part of that, we were saying the first part positive, I think, and with that, we are also doers. Like, we're the people we're the fixers, we're the activists. They talk about all that social entrepreneurship, that we're the generation that has to, if we're gonna have a business degree, we wanna know, or we're going to a business field, we wanna know how that's gonna impact such and such, We're issue-based, we're advocates. So I would say, I mean, I'm a doer, just naturally, and so I love that. I love that, millennials are these doers and they want to change the world, and I think we're still trying to figure out how we do that and pay off our loans. So when we find that out, I'm sure one of you guys will, and then you'll make lots of money because we're starting to figure that out. But we are doers, and that's a big positive, and I love to focus on there's so much negativity with the millennial generation, and if you're just a psychologist, you'd just be like, okay, is it really helpful to constantly bash a generation, to say that you guys are lazy, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you guys think you're just gonna come out of college and have this such and such and such. I don't think that's positive, and I don't think it helps us, and I think we kind of get sucked into that as well as millennials, thinking that they're right. But I want to be that positive person to say every generation has their baggage and has their issues, but we need to figure out how we use that unique, bad circumstance and then use it for the common good in the end. So that's probably not a solution, but that's something up to you guys to solve, or up to all of us to solve in the end.
Wes, do you have a question? Sorry, teacher wants to follow up, and then what?
I do. So my girlfriend likes to say I'm an analog guy in a digital world, so I do not claim to be a millennial, even though I'm 29 years old. What I will say is that in my own observation, I've had the opportunity to teach at the College of Public Policy here at UTSA the last 2 years. And what I've found the greatest weakness for the millennial generation is writing skills. My students who are older than me, who are baby boomer generation, Generation X students, are far better writers than the millennial generation students are. And I think that's a function of not reading as much. Maybe reading tweets instead of Dickens novels. And Dickens novels are incredibly boring, but there's a lot of critical thinking that you learn when you're reading a novel like that. So I would say that really, if you want to have a career in any field, doing anything, focus on your writing skills.
I'll echo that. Professor, I echo that 100%.
And I'll jump into, I think the best thing about millennials, the thing that inspires me at least, is like how passionate we are. And you know, I work for an organization that's all about civic engagement, right? MOVE stands for Mobilize, Organize, Vote, Empower. And so I hear all the time, especially from older people, young people don't vote, young people don't care, young people don't turn out. And some of those things are true, right? Like young people don't vote at super high numbers, but we do care, right? And you can see this sort of change in the way that our parents engage and the way that we do. So we tweet stuff, we share things on Facebook, we sign petitions online, we're engaged in class discussions. We're more likely to protest than our parents were, evidently. You know, there are things that we are incredibly passionate about, and we show up for those things. It's a funny question because I spend so much of my time working defending millennials. So coming at this from the perspective of where are we doing things wrong is an entirely new question to me. But I think the thing that I've observed is like a lack of willingness or desire to engage in conversations that add context to our views. And I think that probably is related to like the fact that we grew up with technology. I'm 23, so I don't consider myself to be, you know, the most high-tech part of the millennials or the most low-tech. Like I got an email address when I was 6. Why, I don't know. But you know, I didn't have an iPad when I was 6, right? So like I'm kind of in that softer spot of the kids who were born in the early 90s. But I think that ultimately what happens is that we're really set in our views and we don't look for context. So like it took me until I was 18 to realize how incredibly prevalent racism still is. Because I'm white, right? Like I didn't have experiences with racism until much further on. And even identifying as a progressive person, I don't think that I knew that context or those stories because I was pretty comfortable in the bubble that I was in. And so I think the thing that I see with a lot of millennials is that when we're talking about racism or sexism or homophobia or whatever it is, when we disagree with people, I don't think we all can take that step back sometimes and look for that greater context because instead we're kind of forcing things into sound bites, which I think we do pretty frequently.
Yes. So first of all, I'd like to say that millennials are definitely the smartest generation yet. But this kind of question goes sort of with the critical viewpoint that a lot of these millennials that you were saying is a negative deal by looking at just one little fact and believing it right away. But it comes down to the perspective bias and the party's view of what they want to represent and be about. But obviously everybody's going to die eventually, and the younger people are going to start to take control. And being that you guys have worked with several of the parties, I mean, what kind of issues and challenges do you guys see in the future as far as moving that party's whole entire perspective and shifting it? Like, being that you're with the Republican Party, but there's and both sides contradict themselves all the time. Like, how do you guys feel, or how do you guys combat those opposing viewpoints to your own, but you still represent that party? What do you do to change it? How does that process look like? Where do you think it's going to go? Kind of, yes.
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like that's my mission right now. So I'm just like, oh yeah. So I actually, like some context, I actually used to identify as a Democrat. I grew up in a Democrat household. My family's, they're all still Democrats. Yes, it is very interesting at the dinner table still today as a Republican now. But I do kind of feel like I have, because I had the more liberal mindset for a while, and so I realized that I am a conservative, I kind of have both sides. And so my mission and passion is to add diversity and diversity of thought into the Republican Party. And that's why I started in a local, as a precinct chair. And that is, what I'm still trying to go towards is, we have these issues, and I think that's kind of why I gravitated towards the more libertarian liberty side, because they're kind of in this middle context with the younger, more diverse thinking side of the Republican Party right now that we wish to move into the mainstream. But looking at that is really focusing on what's wrong with the party, how can we be critical of the party, but how can we use that criticism to not, change the party in a way that would be detrimental to it. And so for me, I think it's, honing in on my uniqueness of my, my story of, criminal justice reform and how that should be a conservative issue. It shouldn't be a Democrat or a Republican issue. It should be an issue that both sides really come together on and stop using politics on it. I'm so sick of it. And then there's different things. I mean, why should it be that we have to say, that we respect police on one side and then we don't respect police? It's not that at all, but we make it into this party issue. So I think one person said it the best. I was at CPAC just yesterday, and one person, a millennial, was saying that, no party owns us. No party owns us. We have issues that we're fired up about, whether that's a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. It doesn't matter. It's an issue that we want to see solved and be fixed. Whatever party takes advantage of that, more power to them. So,
I'll jump in because, as the executive director for MOVE, a lot of my time is spent fundraising. And this is a question that a lot of people ask me, especially before they want to give. There's a question of where are millennials going and to what end, basically. So firstly, 50% of millennials don't identify with a political party. I don't identify with a political party. I think, there's this really interesting space for millennials where, exactly as you said, we care so much about certain issues and we're really passionate about them, but we're not seeing a lot of movement. And I think that's something that turns a lot of folks off to voting. I could ask you right now, how many people here, raise your hand if you think Washington, D.C. is bought out by big money interests? And you can't really have an impact there. There's, you guys get where I'm going, right? The presidency, the amount of money going into it alone isolates us from political parties. And so I think there's a really interesting space for organizations like MOVE to come in as a nonpartisan organization and do voter engagement work. I also think, that it's noteworthy, and I was having this conversation with my friend pretty recently, that we think of the party as an establishment, as a machine, when in actuality it's a group of people. And I was wrestling with this because as I'm making decisions about my career and my life and where I'm going to be after MOVE, I started thinking could I work for the party, knowing that I disagree with it? Am I comfortable with that? Do all of the people who work for the party completely agree with the policies? Do they all actually support all of the candidates down the ballot, right? And I think that there's got to be this understanding that the Democratic Party, the Texas Democratic Party, is run out of a small office in Austin. People go there daily, and they're trying to make the world better, right? I don't know about the Texas Republican Party that much, but I imagine it's a similar situation. Not all Republicans agree on all Republican issues. Not all Democrats agree on Democratic issues. So I really think millennials have an interesting space to take up there that locally could lead to more third-party candidates, nonpartisan candidates getting elected. Nationally, I think it's going to be a while before that's a larger impact.
Yeah, can I
Yeah.
jump in on that? So one thing I love about working at City Hall is it's nonpartisan. So there are 11 people, 10 council members and the mayor. So if we want to do something in the District 8 office, we have to count to 6. So who's going to be on our side, right? In Congress, it's really hard because it's a partisan deal. So you have 197 people with you and 250 against you, no matter what. And on ours, we can be total enemies with somebody on one issue and total allies with them on another issue. And it's really easy to do that. There are no permanent allies, there are no permanent enemies. And by allies, I mean political allies, political enemies. So it's all about relationships. Kathy Garcia, who spoke from CPS Energy earlier, talked about substance plus relationships. And I couldn't have thought about it better myself, because you need to have relationships with people. You also need to be seen as substantive. Second point, a lot of people are caring a lot right now about the presidential election. I'm one of them. But how many people here have thought about how your community is going to have water when you're 50 years old? Right? Yeah, not many. I've spent the last 2 years working on that as a primary issue, and that's going to impact 2 million people. It's a big deal, right? So I would say that you have, on the margin, a huge impact you can make in your local community by getting involved with your local government. So, and especially because it's a nonpartisan framed institution.
And like for me, fiscal issues are so important to me, but if you just focus on the presidency, and even though as a Republican right now, I'm like, I don't even know if they're going to deal with that. But at least you can deal on the local government issue.
Right.
You know, I just got appointed onto the Capital Improvements Board, so I actually get to make a difference with fiscal issues in my town, in my city. And I think we're so ambitious, and we really want to think about the national government. But local government is really where you can make an impact now, and you can see that now. And so I really, I'm getting involved locally because I want to see that difference, and I really would ask you guys to get involved, to get on those boards, to become a precinct chair for your Republican or Democratic Party or whatever party it may be, because that's where you get to make an actual impact and see it actually impacted now.
Yeah, as someone who's super partisan, and I want to run to be like a national delegate, I caution you. I feel like millennials are very worried about labels, and then once you've labeled yourself as a Democrat or you've labeled yourself as a Republican, you have to, like, you're now like the advocate, like you're the delegate, and when someone asks you what your party is and you say you're a Republican, you're like, well, I have to explain all the positions. Like, you are allowed to disagree with the point of a party, and you can be that change in that party. You don't have to run away from the Democratic Party because there's an aspect of it you don't like. Because parties are trying to reflect voters. If you feel that there's a lot of people who feel a certain way, you can be that change in a party. You can make the change. So don't be afraid to be partisan, because the American system is set to be a two-party system. And we can make changes, but the rules of the game are pretty two-party. So if you want to change the party, don't be afraid to go in and make the change, because we can run away from the parties, but that's a much higher uphill battle.
Hey guys, I have a question. How can we work with technology, going back to what we were talking about with millennials and technology, how can we work with technology to get young people to think more objectively and more in context about policies and candidates?
Well, I'll start. I think there's a lot of space to improve the way that politics interacts with technology. So I was just explaining this to somebody the other day, but if y'all get a text on your phone from 57-268, what's the first thought that you get? It's spam, right? So Move is piloting a text opt-in system for voters in San Antonio, people who have pledged to vote with us. It's an opt-in because legally we can't text you if you don't check the box, because you could have messaging rates. But one of the things we're testing is do you respond higher if it starts with a 210 area code? or a 512 area code? My bet is yes, right? We're doing a voter guide for 2016. We did for 2014, 2015 as well. Making things mobile friendly. So not just having the website, which you can access on your cell phone, but actually making it easy to navigate on your cell phone with a mobile version is really important. And then frankly, I mean, this is maybe a cop-out answer, but it's the thing I see most often. I think we need to let millennials and tech people and voting people like come together and figure it out. Because the thing that is most frustrating to me, and I say this with no disrespect to anybody over the age of 65, but I walk into a room a lot and people say, you guys aren't voting. That's it, right? Sometimes there's a question of like, how can we help get more people to vote? What do you think? You know, whatever. And oftentimes when I answer, I get pushback from people where they say, no, 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 we tried that, like you're wrong. At which point it's really difficult for me to have a productive, strategic conversation with people, right? So I think what we need to do to help young people, you know, really utilize technology for civic engagement is like make it a priority, which means that you need to have funders and donors who will give scholarships or grants to people who are doing research on this and testing it. And then secondly, like give people the space to figure out what works best. And that's gonna be different in different communities. I don't think there's necessarily, you know, a national answer, but like what's the best way to engage with people in San Antonio? How is that different from people in other parts of Texas? That's probably different from Montana, which is different from New York, right? I think we need to make it a priority, fund it, and give folks a space to figure out the answers. And that's, you know, kind of my best response to it.
And we're really poised to help politicians in the public sector because they are truly thirsty for people who understand technology, who understand social media, and there's two tracks for that. They need people who can do the analytics of campaigns, people who can take data from huge databases like NPG Van for Democrats and understand that if you knock on someone's door, there's a 6% chance of them coming out to the polls, versus if you leave just a door knocker, that's 2%. Like, people need that information, and that's critical for campaigns in this era. And you can go in that field and make bank. Or people also need, like, older politicians from every level, local all the way to president. They need people who understand the social media field, and they are hiring. Like, they are looking for people who can go in, write a pithy tweet that's connected to some, you know, this event and a picture. They need that. And so that's where millennials come in, because we can provide that and it can expand. We're coming up with different apps. There's different things that are civically engaged. We can create that and people want it.
And one of the things I'll just jump in with, so like I work for a nonpartisan group, so while I have a lot of conversations about politics, I probably won't tell you who I voted for. But one of the things that I thought Bernie Sanders did that was so cool, and I'm sure Maya agrees with me on this actually, is like outsourcing a lot of coding and tech and letting the campaigns in the grassroots level work with like the programs that their volunteers came up with. Like, I don't know if you read about it, but somebody created Airbnb for Bernie or whatever. So Bernie supporters had an app where like during major primaries, you could just jump on and go stay with a supporter. They had all of these different like coders, basically. I mean, it's not endorsed by the campaign, but they're allowing people to put this technology on the marketplace, which I think is really cool because it gives everybody access to it. So like, I'm certain that by the time Hillary is working towards November, a couple months out from that, she's going to be using similar technology. And it's really cool to see that folks are able to volunteer and put that out there. And campaigns are like uplifting that and utilizing that in the way that they should.
And that's why it's important, we were talking about not sticking to just one party or whatever and being partisan. Like, I mean, just that Airbnb Bernie thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, why aren't we using that on
You should
side?
do that, yeah.
You know? But then I hear from other Democrats, like, you know, on the Republican side, you guys really do well with fundraising, like really well. So it's just like taking the good parts of each and using that. You know, the smart people are gonna do that. There are a lot of people who are still stuck in their ways. You know, I told you I was just at CPAC, and I was just like the I guess I was a social media expert because I was just like, you know what? Yes, black you guys don't care, or not don't care, but you didn't really like Occupy Wall Street, or you didn't like Black Lives Matter, or whatever. Okay, it's not about the policy issue right there. They're successful because we're talking about it right now, and they did not understand that, you know. And so I was able to get that and tell them, hey, you guys can't always just because you don't agree on the policy side of it doesn't mean that it's not right or successful in another way. And so the smart people are gonna know that, they're gonna identify that, but they're also gonna speak up and use it to the advantage of their party or whatever their side or issue is to help their side as well.
Time for one more. All right, we've got one in the back here.
Hi, I'm Mary Holt. I'm a Houston Tillotson University student. My question is, what is your specific skill set that you feel has made you successful in what you do?
Okay, I'm trying to figure that out still. I'll be totally honest. I have I guess an interesting perspective on that as an executive director, which means that I do a lot of different pieces of our work. So yes, I do the fundraising, I do the administrative, I do the operations, I do strategic planning. Sometimes I work with our interns and fellows. Shout out to Raven and Rebecca. You know, I do some voter registration, rarely, but it happens. I manage our board of directors. I have one of those jobs where I just kind of pick up all the odds and ends. I think the most important thing throughout all of that has been learning how to communicate effectively. And so some of this goes into this like, be your authentic self message that I think everybody is echoing on this panel. But the other lesson that I'm really fond of sharing is from the Management Center, which is a really great resource if you're a manager and you're looking for tools and resources. But they have this phrase, which is make the implicit explicit. I don't know if they created it, but I'll say that they did. And that's the thing that I've learned, I think, in communication that's helped me most. You know, in fundraising, that means that I'm going to do a hard ask, which means instead of saying like, hey, can you donate, it's, can you donate $1,000 to sponsor this event? I'm gonna be specific. When I'm managing people, you know, instead of saying to Raven, hey, can you prepare a debrief for me on this program? I'm gonna say like, hey Raven, by tomorrow at 5 p.m., I need a debrief on our letterhead that outlines exactly what we did, you know, in the phone bank on this date. It should be 1 page, Helvetica New, comma light, comma 12-point font, because that's how I want everything to look. You know, there's a lot of different spaces for it, but ultimately I think learning how to communicate through making my implicit assumptions explicit is probably the best skill that I've learned.
I'd say for me, it would definitely have to be more of that I'm more diplomatic in my nature. Like I said before, I'm the Southwest Director for Students for Concealed Carry on campus, and that is a heated issue. Of course, you guys are probably already keeping up with that now. And I've had people tell me that, you know, you're the first pro-gun rights advocate that didn't like scream at me after I, you know, had any type of dissent toward what you were just saying. And I hear that a lot, and it's kind of sad, you know. And I realized quickly that, and people on both sides have told me that I'm more diplomatic, I'm more tactful, and so I realized that that skill set is just being civil, you know, in a conversation. And maybe it's because, you know, I come from a Democrat family, and I surround myself with people who think differently than me, and so I have that that practice, that training ground, which I think more people need to have, because I think a lot of people do not know how to have a conversation without, you know, hurting people or calling people's hands bigger than the other. Trump.
Okay, that's hilarious.
So, you know, is this, you know, so I think it's something that we have to learn, but it's something that's, in the end, it's just be a decent human being and own that and be okay with that, because sometimes it's not popular, but it's what we need to have actual engagement in this country.
Okay, so let me just follow up on that. bad. So let's go with the hand comment.
Sorry.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, my friend just started a Donald Trump has tiny hands pack, and you can find that pack on Twitter and Facebook.
It only took us an hour.
And we
Some of
got-
that. It only took us an hour to get there.
TJ, do you have something to
Yeah,
add?
I do. Yeah.
Please.
So as a double major in government and communications, I often so my communication classes filled with women, my government classes filled with men, and so when I go out into politically engaged arenas, it's very male focused, and so I think one of my skills is, and I think this is harder for women to bring, not that they don't have it, and I think some men as well, is to be a leader and to step into a leadership role. Like, if it's your role, do it. And don't be afraid to tell someone this is your job and then follow up and say, did you do that? Like, if you're someone who's in a leadership position, or if you're a president of an organization, or someone's given you a task, never be afraid to do your best, push back, and ask for excellence. And I think if you are willing to own your own leadership skills, other people will see it. And other people will accept it. And maybe there are times when you will be in a situation where someone's like, go get the coffee. You are in a place where you can say, no, actually my role here is not to do that. I'm going to go do policy work. So I think you need to be aware of your skills and willing to push those skills forward. And that's really hard, to know what you can bring to the table and being self-aware to know that you're right now in a place that's needed and that you can say, I'm here and this is my voice.
So when I was a senior in college, I delivered pizzas for Papa John's. I had this old car that would screech everywhere I went, driving around Lubbock delivering pizzas. And when I did that, I listened to podcasts about all sorts of different subjects: economics, law, policy, communications, you name it. And I just kept doing that. So if you get in my car right now, there'll be a podcast about something. So that's curiosity, right? That's what I bring, is curiosity, which allows you to think about issues or challenges in the workplace on multiple different planes. So you think about it from, for me, a legal plane, a policy plane, a PR plane. And it allows you to approach challenges from several different points of view. So while I am a specialist, I'm a lawyer, that's my training, I'm also a generalist in the things that I'm interested in, which I believe makes me more effective. So.
On that, I want to first off thank the panel here because they did an amazing job. I think you would agree at enlightening us all. And then I think we're the last panel of the day. Is that accurate? So I also want to do a very quick thank you to the Strauss Institute for coming down today to do this, to Drew, to Emily, to Susan, who have given up their day, and Dean Sines, who he and the College of Public Policy, if you know bureaucracies, you know that it takes a massive army to get something like this done. So thank you, Dean Sines, for putting this on.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dixon, Dr. Dixon. Thank you, panelists. We have just some quick wrap-up things, and then we're going to get you guys out of here, okay? So as you know, you did a pre-test whenever you signed up and you registered. We have a post-test that will help us understand how effective today's conference was for you and what parts you liked best and where we can make changes for future conferences. This will take like 5 minutes, so we just need everybody to kind of quickly fill it out. You can drop it off here at the front. Whenever you're done, we'll sort of wrap up and give you a little bit more information about the networking event. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes to fill this out. If you need a pen, raise your hand and we'll bring cool Annette Strauss pens around to you, okay? That's a great question. Let me pass this out. Oh, I think that we got everybody. Well, everybody. Can you hear me? Clap once if you can hear me. Hello? Oh, there we go. Okay. Thanks so much, guys. We're going to get you out of here pretty quick. So Madison at the door, Madison's waving. She's going to take your program evaluations when you're done. You can have the pen. Please take extras. Take buttons if you like as well. We've got plenty of those. So when you leave, please give your program evaluation to Madison. We thank you so much for taking the extra time to do that. It really does help our programs a lot. If you have any trash near your chair, if you'll pick that up, throw that in the trash can on your way out. We have extra lunches, so if you're not going to join us for the networking event or you're heading back to Austin or College Station, please take a box lunch on your way out. We definitely do not want to throw those away in the trash can. So finally, we want to just say, can I see a show of hands if you would like to go to the networking event later today? We're going to get appetizers at Pico de Gallo. We just want to, so let's see, we've got, come on, you know you want to come. Okay, so we're going to walk from here over to Pico de Gallo in the next couple minutes, so just follow us over or we'll meet you over there. So finally, we wanted to say thank you so much, especially to the Hatton Sumners Foundation, who has helped fund New Politics Forum for the last years, and especially as a huge funder for this for Careers in Politics. I want to thank the Annette Strauss Institute staff, specifically Susan, Emily, and Madison, who came down from Austin to help with this event. And UTSA Dean Sines, thank you so much. Nowcast, thank you so much for being here and live streaming for us and archiving. And then all of our speakers and moderators who were here today. And most of all, thank you. Thank you so much for spending a Saturday afternoon with us. And thank you for spending the time to care about civic engagement and care about good government and care about self-governance. And so we really hope that you take what you learned today and get out there and change the world. So thank you so much and see you at the next San Antonio event.